What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Omni-sensei here with What if IZUKU unleashed an OP HAKI Quirk? HAKIMAN Deku, Part 2. If you enjoy this type of content, please Detroit smash the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Remember to check out the original story linked in the description. Without further ado, let's get into the legend of a conqueror hero. The semester exams went like a whirlwind. Well, the written exams were certainly easy. It was the practical exam that showed me the difference between the strength of the strongest and my own. A few days before the practical exams, IZUKU had told us what we were supposed to do to pass the exams, while she was dragging away Monoma after he was trying to antagonize us. Really, I thought after that beating I gave him, he would improve. But he was lacking the jealousy he used to have, and it had been replaced by competitiveness, which was a good thing. Anyway, the exam was supposed to be like the entrance test. Beat the robots to earn points. It was really simple, but the teachers changed it. We had to fight a staff member while being paired with each other. I was excited about the challenge. Facing a hero would have been a great experience. I was secretly hoping for it to be midnight, but then I was told that I had to face All Might. My dream was crushed. It was bad enough that I was going to face All Might, but I was also paired with Katsuki, of all students. It was the worst kind of feeling to be paired with him. The only thing even worse would be to be paired with Endeavor. When I learnt Mineta and Zero would be facing Midnight, I wanted to dig a hole in the ground and bury them alive. But those murderous thoughts went away as soon as they appeared. The first exam was of Todoroki and Yaoyorozu versus Aizawa-sensei. I was right in my assessment of Yaoyorozu back during the sports festival. She had confidence issues and trusted Todoroki's plan in the beginning. But when the boy realized that they were losing time, he asked Yaoyorozu about her opinion. And boy, was it the right decision. As the other students fought against the teachers, Katsuki and I were walking through a maze of streets and trying to find All Might. When the exam started, my first thought was to just fly to the exit and take Katsuki along with me. Turning to face him, I said, "Katsuki, I think we should fly to the exit as fast as we can before All Might catches up to us. My speed is fairly good when I'm flying. I think we can manage to end this without a confrontation with him." Katsuki scoffed, like I would run away like a coward. "Deku, if you want to go with your tail tucked between your legs, then be my guest. I will face All Might and defeat him today. I don't need your help anyway." My eye twitched in irritation. He wanted to fight against All Might all on his own and expected to win? Finally, I found the perfect name for him. "You've been calling me Deku since we were 4 years old. I resent the name and believe it's laughable that you were defeated by this Deku during the sports festival. You really are an idiot if you think you can defeat a pro hero of the caliber of All Might, Bakasuki." The idiot whirled around towards me, his face contorting to the ultimate ugliness as he snarled. "What did you call me?" Unfazed, I retorted. "I called you an idiot. You are a self-obsessed idiot who thinks that the world is inferior to him. But I can't put all the blame on you. No, partly, it's the fault of our peers and those teachers who inflated your ego and turned a blind eye to your bullying. There's something wrong in your head if you believe you can defeat All Might all on your own." Bakasuki shouted, "I will blow your head up, you damn Deku. There you go again. Why don't you actually try and do it and show the world the kind of villain you are?" Because only a villain would threaten his peers to blow them up just because he couldn't handle the truth. With a dangerous smirk on my face, I continued, "How about a wager? We both will fight All Might. The one who is defeated by him will agree to any request the other one makes. If both of us are defeated, then the first to fall will be the loser of this bet." As expected, the short fuse took the bait. Hook, line, and sinker. We walked around and searched for All Might. I was just having fun watching Bakasuki try and fail to find him. If he thought for a bit, he would have realized that I could easily find where that musclehead of a hero was. 2 minutes later, we were out in the open and just a few hundred meters away from the exit. All Might chose to make an appearance right at that moment. As usual, his entrance was not normal. Creating a violent gust of wind with his punch, He decimated a portion of the mock city and exclaimed, "Now, get ready to have a really bad time. I'm a villain, heroes. Give me your best shot." The air around him was completely different than what it usually was. It was tough to fight against the feeling of intimidation that was coursing through my body. The only thing that kept me level-headed was Conqueror's will. Katsuki immediately reacted and shot towards All Might. You want me to explain the ass-kicking he got? Well, All Might was very serious when he was facing us and used brute force to endure Katsuki's explosions. Completely unfazed, he swatted Katsuki away like a fly, not giving him a moment to recover. All Might grabbed the idiot by his head and slammed him face-first into the road. Then Katsuki was thrashed around like a ragdoll till he fainted from being brutalized. Katsuki was captured before he could even begin to fight properly. I guess it was partly my fault. He was too provoked and angry to think properly of a strategy, although I was not expecting him to be captured that easily. I wanted to make Katsuki realize that working together as a team is much better than trying to work solo. I wanted to make him realize the value of teamwork. All Might looked towards me while he stomped Katsuki's back and asked, "Young Midoriya, are you going to leave your teammate and make a break for it?" My plan was ruined. I wasted no time and flew towards All Might to confront him, with my body covered by armament. I threw a punch at All Might's jaw in an attempt to make him free Katsuki, who was lying under All Might's foot. All Might tried to grab my punch, but I easily anticipated it by using observation. I maneuvered in the air and avoided the hold. With my fist glowing with intense aura, I clocked his jaw with all of my strength. To my shock, it wasn't enough to throw him through the buildings, and only pushed him a few feet away. All Might rubbed his jaw and said, "That was a good punch, young Midoriya, but it's not enough to defeat me." I smirked and replied while picking Katsuki up, "Who said anything about defeating you? I'm not an idiot to think I can achieve such a feat as I am now." Wasting no further time, I flew as fast as I could with Katsuki hanging on my shoulder like a sack of potatoes and made a beeline towards the exit, knowing fully well that All Might was closing in towards me. Just as All Might was about to hit me on my back with a New Hampshire smash, I once again dodged it by spinning away and came face to face with All Might. With a menacing smile appearing on my face in response to his surprised look, I said, "You can never catch me off guard, All Might. Now face my indomitable will." I pulled back my arm as the glowing aura intensified and expanded around it to form a gigantic fist. "I call it judgment, sucker." With a mighty roar, I brought down the fist of judgment on All Might and sent him crashing into the road. With All Might temporarily taken care of, I flew towards the exit and managed to get past it just in time for All Might to come out of the crater that was formed due to the force of his impact with the road. This is an announcement. The first team to pass is Midoriya and Bakugo. I immediately threw Katsuki off my shoulder and began dragging him along to see Recovery Girl. As he stirred awake, I smiled down at him innocently and said, "I won the wager, Bakasuki. Now, as per the rules, you have to do what I tell you to and you can't argue against it. You won't go back on your word, would you? Because that won't be very heroic of you." I bet he was seeing two horns on my head and a tail swishing behind my back. He lost a bet with the devil. As Recovery Girl treated Katsuki, I decided to tell him what he had to do, being the loser of the bet. I waited for Recovery Girl to leave and asked Katsuki, "Do you remember a boy named Yoroi Kaneda? He used to be a student in our class back in primary school." Katsuki looked at me questioningly. I sighed and elaborated. He had a quirk that made his skin burn in sunlight. You bullied him a lot because of that. I want you to come with me to see him and his family. Although, that's only part of what I want you to do. Katsuki scowled but didn't utter a word. His eyes held a hint of sadness and guilt. Good, you should feel guilty. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm not sorry for it. It's all part of your redemption, Katsuki. I left the room for Katsuki to recover and joined Todoroki and Yaoyorozu, who were with Recovery Girl and observing the rest of the tests. I suddenly noticed something as I was watching the screens. I know they're calling it a test, but each matchup almost seems like a specialized assignment, right? Recovery Girl responded, "That's right." I continued, "The teams and the matchups with the teachers is obvious to understand." I pointed towards a screen and said, "Take Ectoplasm versus Tokoyami and Tsuyu. Tokoyami has a very strong quirk, and his Dark Shadow has only one weakness. It's perfect for defense and long-ranged attacks. But if someone gets closer to him, Tokoyami will be in trouble as his physical constitution is weak. Someone like Ectoplasm who has numbers with him along with his expertise in close combat. I watched as Tsuyu managed to save Tokoyami right when Ectoplasm was about to hit him. Then there's Tsuyu. She can easily provide support and cover up. Also, she's level-headed in the most difficult situations, and that makes her great for emotional support. Tsuyu and Tokoyami fought together and managed to evade Ectoplasm's attacks as they made their way to the exit. But Ectoplasm overwhelmed them with a gigantic clone and managed to trap them. Finally, Tsuyu decided to regurgitate the handcuffs she had swallowed to keep them away from Ectoplasm and gave them to Tokoyami for Dark Shadow to use them and capture Ectoplasm. On the other screen, Kaminari and Ishido were struggling against Principal Nizu, who was tactically closing off all the exits while drinking tea and laughing maniacally like a supervillain. It was kinda scary to watch. Nizu was the worst matchup for straightforward people like Kaminari and Ishido. Koda and Jiro were backed into a corner, as Present Mike was constantly sending sonic attacks towards them while casually standing in front of the exit gate. I remembered that Koda had a quirk that allowed him to talk to animals and somewhat influence them. But he was a very shy person and didn't talk at all. When they could do nothing, and it looked like Jiro was in a lot of pain from being constantly assaulted by Present Mike's attacks, Koda manned up and talked to insects, conquering his fear of the little animals. The way Present Mike was attacked by the insects, it made my skin crawl as I shivered. Suffice to say the voice hero was soundly defeated. But what I saw on the next screen made me want to abandon my dream to be a hero and kill someone. Specifically Siro, who was sleeping in Midnight's lap as she caressed his hair with her soft and delicate hands while Mineta was running away, crying tears of blood as he watched Siro in her lap. Oh, it was tough to control myself. As Midnight followed Mineta and cornered him, her words and the look in her eyes turned my brain into mud as I entered a trance. I had the material for the night, and so many nights following that. I had to use my quirk and will my tiger to stay down. Anyway, Mineta managed to outsmart Midnight and walked out of the exit gate with Siro, who was still sleeping soundly. I quietly left the room and returned a few minutes later as I had some business to take care of. The rest of the students managed to pass their respective exams, except Ishido, Kaminari, Kirishima, and Sato. Katsuki was bedridden for a few hours, and so was Siro from injuries that he somehow received. No one knew how since he didn't engage in any fight during the exam. Hey, who are you looking at? Anyway, the exam was a bittersweet ending for us. Some managed to grow, while some failed to surpass their limits. Back in our classroom, the 4 who had failed were on the verge of crying, or in case of Kirishima, manly sweat from his eyes. Aizawa-sensei slammed the door open and ordered us to take our seats. That's the bell. Back to your seats. Standing in front of the class, he said, mourning. About your exam. Sadly, we had some failures, so you all will be going to the summer camp. The entire class exclaimed, WHAAT? The school played us. It was rational deception. Rational deception, my ass. You all passed the written exam, but Ishido, Kirishima, Kaminari, Sato, and Siro failed the practical. Siro, who was sitting beside me, sighed. Perhaps he estimated the outcome as he did nothing during the practical. Failure is still failure, rational deception or not. You 5 will receive additional supplement lessons. And to be honest, they'll be far worse than summer school. I felt pity for the 5. Who am I kidding? I was enjoying the looks on their faces. Aizawa-sensei was a sadist. After the class, Hagakure asked, since we are free tomorrow, how about we go to the mall shopping for anything we need for the summer camp? Most of the students agreed. When they asked me, I simply replied, I'm sorry. As much as I want to come with you guys, I have to visit an old friend, and so does Katsuki. Well, they bought it and we left for our homes. The next day, I met Katsuki outside his house, and we rode the subway to our destination. We walked all the way to our destination. No one uttered a word. Even though Katsuki wanted to ask, he didn't, seeing that at that time, I had a very serious look on my face. When we reached where Kaneda was residing, Katsuki looked around in confusion. I stopped, turned around and said, We're here. Here. I nodded to my side, and as he looked, his eyes grew impossibly wide as despair and panic filled his countenance. His breath got erratic, and I could feel his ego breaking. Of course it would, for in front him was the grave of Yoroi Kaneda, who died at the age of 10. Kaneda died because he removed his protective clothes under the sun and burnt to death. They tried everything but nothing worked, not even fire extinguishers. Within minutes, Kaneda was reduced to ashes. There's nothing buried in this grave, because there was nothing left to bury. Katsuki just stood in his place, his eyes fixated on the gravestone as I continued. There was a note found under his pillow by his mother. I found about it and asked Mr. and Mrs. Yoroi to take action, but they refused. I still have that note with me. Wanna read it? I handed him the note as he wordlessly grabbed it and began reading. I don't want to live anymore. This quirk I have is a curse. I'm sorry, Mama, Papa. I'm not a strong boy. I was born cursed. Bakugo is right. Maybe I should die and pray for a better quirk in my next life. I just hope that I get parents like you if I am reborn. I love you, Mama, Papa, and I know that you love me. I'm sorry that I'm going to do this, but this is my choice. Kaneda. The letter dropped from his hands as he fell on his knees, his eyes still fixated on the gravestone. Look at the graves on either side of Kaneda's. I told you that you'll be meeting him and his parents. His parents couldn't bear the loss of their only child and killed themselves. Mrs. Yoroi was found dead as she bled out from cuts on her wrists, and Mr. Yoroi hung himself to the ceiling fan. I felt no pity for Katsuki at that moment as he trembled and cried his eyes out. With a look of extreme hatred, I continued, You killed them, Katsuki. You destroyed their family. You drove them to commit suicide because you couldn't live with the fact that he was getting better marks than you in school. I could have informed the police and destroyed your future. But Mrs. Yoroi stopped me. She made me promise her to help you to become a good hero, because she feared the kind of villain you could become. I thought you would improve as you age, but no, you've gotten worse. I hope this is the last time I have to tell you to let go of your overinflated ego, because if you don't, there will be many such families you're going to ruin in the future. Katsuki stayed seated on the ground and kept crying and repeatedly apologizing, but it was way too late for the Yoroi family. At the very least, Katsuki had a better chance of improving after learning about his biggest mistake. A/N. Kids are not criminals. Kids make mistakes, not commit crimes. They can't be judged the way we judge grown-ups. Think before you comment about it. While we were returning to our homes, I spoke. As I said yesterday, that was only half of your punishment. He looked at me in panic as I continued. For the whole summer camp, you won't be referring to anyone by the word extra and will use their proper names to address them. You won't swear at all and will wholeheartedly cooperate with your fellow students without being rude to them at all. If you don't, I'll personally inform your mother about all of your pornographic collection, all the magazines and the videos you have hidden away. Good day. With that, I walked away as Katsuki sputtered in panic. His mom knowing about his collection was the worst thing that could happen to him. Even worse than not becoming a hero. Well, his bad. I had my way with him and showed him the truth of the consequences of his actions. It all depended on how he interpreted it in the future. The location of our summer camp was changed because of security reasons. With the USJ attack and the League of Villains attack in Hosa City, there was a high chance that they'd try and attack us during the summer camp. The day finally arrived when we were going to leave for the camp. Katsuki had been very subdued since the day I took him to see Kaneda's grave. He was still sorting his mind while coming to terms with the fact that his actions had such consequences. I was chatting and joking around with the guys when Class 1B arrived. My eyes immediately drifted towards Itsuka. She was beautiful as ever. She looked at me and smiled. It felt brighter than the smiles she'd give to her friends from her class. I looked around and noticed that something had changed. The world seemed to be more colorful than before. The chirping of the birds was louder and more pleasant. The morning summer breeze was more refreshing. I looked at her again, and she waved at me with a faint blush flaring up on her pale cheeks. Was she always this enchanting? The answer instantaneously came to me. Yes, she was always beautiful. Unlike those dumbass beta main characters from shonen mangas, who were too stupid to comprehend the certain spectrum of emotions, I was certain of what I was feeling. Those budding emotions that gave birth to a new kind of warmth in my chest were enough to tell me. Midnight may have been my first crush, but what I was feeling for Itsuka was different. It was certainly much purer than the simple physical attraction I had towards Midnight. Teenage was a very interesting time in one's life. I had done extensive research on the internet about it. I couldn't help it. My hormones were acting up. Way to go, IZUKU. You fell for your childhood friend. I don't know what happened, but my sadistic mind suddenly gave me a mental picture of Katsuki. I need a psychiatrist. That was too traumatic. We boarded the bus, drove to the location of our summer camp. I was happy that we were going to share the same camping grounds with Class 1B. I wanted to spend a lot of time with Itsuka and explore the spectrum of emotions that was fairly new to me. An hour later, we stopped by a cliff to take a break from traveling. But it didn't look like a resting stop. Even Class B's bus wasn't there. Aizawa-sensei spoke up to clear our confusion. Of course we stopped here for a reason. From around the corner, we heard someone say, "Hey, Eraser. Sorry, haven't seen you in a while. Rock on with those sparkling gazes. Stunningly cute and cat-like. We're the wild pussycats." Two fully grown, well-endowed and athletic women wearing mini skirts and short, sleeveless tank tops that revealed their toned yet creamy soft abdomens? Yeah, I agreed with Mineta's comment that he made during our first battle trial. Hero course was awesome. Did I have a thing for older women? I blamed the internet. Aizawa-sensei quickly interjected when he saw our confused faces. These are the pro heroes who'll be helping us this time. The Pussycats. My nerd self immediately flared up to life. A 4-member hero team that worked under the same hero agency. They're a veteran team that specializes in mountain rescue operations. They've been in it for 12 years now. My stupid nerd persona was a character flaw that would sometimes emerge from the pits of my mind when I used to get too excited upon seeing heroes. It was very embarrassing. Itsuka would always tease me for it. The blonde heroine, Pixie Bob, heard me and quickly said, "But still 18 at heart." She was about to shove her gloved hand over my mouth, but I instinctively dodged. Mandalay started. "This whole area is our territory," she said while pointing towards the valley below us, all the while ignoring Pixie Bob comically fussing and trying to grab my face as I effortlessly dodged her hand with an expressionless face. Mandalay continued, "Your lodging is at the foot of the hill over there." We looked at the hill she was pointing at. It was quite far away. I suddenly got a bad feeling. Yue was known to give surprise exercises, and knowing that sadistic Aizawa. In a cold voice, Mandalay said, "It's 9:30 a.m. now. I'm thinking, around noon should be fine." Ah crud, no way. Kiddies who don't make it there by 12:30 p.m. won't get any lunch. While the rest of my classmates began running away, I could feel the ground rising from below, and I flew up into the air to avoid any kind of eruption. Sorry kids, the training's already begun. True to my instincts, Pixie Bob used her quirk to throw everyone off the mountain and into the valley. I landed in the valley and helped Uraraka up, who had taken a pretty bad fall. Ignoring the sudden intense blush on her face, I heard Mandalay shouting down at us. "This is our private territory. You're free to use your quirks. You've got 3 hours to reach our territory on foot." I used Will of Observation and spread it all over the valley. I could feel Pixie Bobs were all over the place, even below the ground. A monstrous being made of earth emerged from the trees. Koda tried to talk to it, but he failed, which meant that it was Pixie Bob's quirk at work. Without wasting any time, Will of Armament rippled around my body as One for All turned its color to emerald green. I jumped at the earth monster and punched it in the face, making it crumble and break apart. As we were facing the beasts that were ambushing us from all directions, I shouted to everyone, "Guys, these beasts are everywhere in the forest. We won't make it in time if we face them individually. Let's team up in groups of 4. They all agreed to my suggestion, even Katsuki, and we made 5 teams of 4 according to the compatibility of our quirks and skills. Fighting those earth monsters was a challenge, and I didn't hold back while facing them. Extending my will out of my hands, I created constructs of green aura and struck multiple beasts all at once. I even got a chance to extend my arsenal of moves. The training exercise was proving to be very fruitful. As we got closer to the campsite, the number of the beasts attacking us increased. I still had an ace up my sleeve. The beasts were controlled by Pixie Bob's will. It was easy to think of a way to defeat them all at once. With only a few minutes left in our time limit, I felt that enough was enough and shot out a pulse of Conqueror's will in all directions. The beasts stopped momentarily and began crumbling all at once. Seeing our chance, we ran straight to the campsite and made it just in time for the clock to read 12:30. Pixie Bob looked at us in fascination. "I thought you'll take a lot more time to complete the exercise." "Huh, seems like we greatly underestimated you." Aizawa-sensei stared at me for a moment and turned around while saying, "I told you that 3 hours was too easy for them. You should have listened to me." I was happy. We were getting stronger. Even though I took care of the beasts at the end, I could see that everyone was improving from the way they worked together. The future of heroes was bright. As Pixie Bob was trying to grab my head again after I tried to guess her age, I noticed a little kid glaring at us. Curious, I asked, "Whose kid is that?" Mandalay looked at the kid and replied, "Oh, he's my nephew." She waved at him and said, "Koda, come over and say hello. You'll be spending a week with these guys, after all." I approached him with a smile and offered a handshake. "Hi, I'm Midoriya Izuku from UA High School's hero course." Kita looked at me and then he suddenly stepped forward to punch me in the balls. Rude kid. Little did the prick expected. Koda pulled his fist back with tears in his eyes as he held his injured hand. I smirked and said, "Nice try, kid. Unluckily for you, I have balls of steel." But Ida would have none of it. He immediately shouted, "Hey, nephew, why did you punch Midoriya in the junk?" Then his head snapped towards me and said, "Stop showing off by using your quirk to harden your junk. Everyone." I did not mean it in that way. Get your minds out of the gutter. After that little comic show, we were led to the dining hall and chowed down all the food available. Once again, it was like watching a comic show from the boys' side as they devoured all the food like a bunch of hooligans. Except for Ida. Everything he did was in a proper way. So there he was eating like a proper hooligan. It was quite a sight to see. Later in the evening, we went to a hot spring to get a bath. Soon, Mineta started acting very strange. He had his ear against the wooden wall that surrounded the bath area. When I asked him why he was acting that way, he replied, "To be honest, the food was all right. But that's not what I was really after. Should be right around here." From the other side of the wooden wall, I could faintly hear, "Ah, I've never felt this good. Can you believe there's a hot spring here? This is the best." Mineta continued, "Yes, they're really there. Guess they don't have girls and boys baths at different times nowadays. An accident. We might have a little accident today." We all tensed up, and I could hear some of the boys gulp a nervous blob of saliva. Ida immediately jumped out of the spring and shouted at the drooling Mineta, "Stop right there, Mineta. What you're suggesting will bring shame to both us and our female classmates." "So strict," Mineta said. Then, Mineta detached 2 of his balls from his head and sped up the wooden wall like his ass was on fire. Drool and sweat overflowing from his face, he looked like a psycho pervert. I was ready to fly up and punt him on his head, not bothering if I caused some brain damage to his mind. But I sensed someone on the wall and knew that I wasn't needed. Right when Mineta was about to reach the top, Koda, Mandalay's nephew, said as he pushed Mineta down, "A hero, really? Learn to be a good person first." Mineta fell down, cursing the kid. His towel came undone and so, his naked but was aimed directly at Ida's gaping face. I would have laughed if not for the kid to turn around and faint from his brain being overflooded with blood, causing him to fall. Wasting no time, I flew up to catch him, preventing his fall to even begin. I lifted my head up in relief, only for my eyes to bug out as they settled on something I would never forget. I saw brown hair cut into a bob. Eyes widened in shock. A frighteningly red face caused from realization that I was looking at the said person. 2 pale, soft and wet mounds being pushed together by tense and pale forearms. The pink tips on those mounds from which water droplets trickled down, slowly, teasing and tickling the curves that met with a flat abdomen. It was so heavenly. My eyes rolled back into their sockets as I fell down with Koda still in my hold. For the first time, someone had managed to knock me out. But I had no regrets. I woke up in the infirmary, still in my towel. Looking at my side, I saw Mandalay sitting beside the still unconscious Koda. She perked up as she noticed that I was awake and said, "Oh, you're awake." She looked at Koda and continued, "He must have fainted from the fear of falling. Thanks for saving him." "Not really, the little shit saw heaven and couldn't handle its beauty. Much like me." She continued, "We put him up there on guard because a racer told us that one of you is the embodiment of lust. Girls sure grow up fast, huh? How did you faint, by the way?" I nervously rubbed the back of my head and replied, Must have been the sudden change in temperature. Anyway, I'm just glad that no one was hurt. I had noticed his hateful glares earlier and heard his comments of heroes. So I asked, "Koda, seems to be pretty opposed to heroes." "Huh." I elaborated, "Well, all my life, I've been surrounded by people who want to be heroes. Even I aim to be one, and so I joined UA. Isn't it unusual for a kid his age to be like this? Mandalay looked a bit solemn and changed the wet cloth on Koda's forehead while saying, "Right. Naturally, there are quite a few people in our society who don't think much of heroes. He'd probably look up to heroes too if he was raised normally." "Normally?" I asked. Pixie Bob, who most probably heard our conversation, entered the room and answered instead of Mandalay. Mandalay's cousins were Koda's parents. They were heroes who died in the line of duty. 2 years ago, they died protecting civilians from a villain. There's no better way for heroes to die in the line of duty, an honorable death. Oh, but a child his age who just started learning about the world couldn't understand that because his parents were his entire world. To him, it was like they'd left him all alone. But society kept praising them, saying that what they did was brave and noble. Mandalay lovingly stroked Koda's hair as she patted the wet cloth on his forehead, while Pixie Bob continued, "I don't think Koda likes us too much either. But with no other relatives to rely on, he cooperates. To him, heroes are stupid people he can't understand." Then Pixie Bob looked at me and momentarily stared. She turned her head away and coughed in her hand while saying, "Why don't you go and put some clothes on?" I just nodded and left. I kept hearing different perspectives on what others thought about heroes, but I had nothing to say in reply. We were woken up at 5:30 in the morning to begin our training. Well, I was a morning person, so I didn't have any problem with it. But most of my classmates, their stupid faces with half-asleep eyes was a funny sight to see. "Morning, kids," Aizawa-sensei began. "Today, the real training camp begins. Ideally, you all will emerge stronger, strong enough to get your provisional licenses. More specifically, there's a growing hostile force out there. Through this, you'll be prepared to face it. So stay sharp and work hard." He tossed a ball at me and said, "To start with, Midoriya, throw this. Last time, right after school started, your record was 5,396 meters. How much have you grown since then?" I raised an eyebrow and looked at him questioningly. Seeing him nod, I just shrugged and covered my entire body with armament, along with activating 70% of One for All. I had improved a lot since the day I started studying in the hero course. My armament was strong enough to work with 70% power of One for All. But if I pushed it to the absolute limits, I was sure that I could manage around 77%. Going into the clearing, I looked at everyone and spoke, "Get far away from here. I don't want to hurt anyone." Looking at Aizawa-sensei, I continued, "You too, sensei." As they immediately complied, sensing the tone of my voice, I raised my left leg and stomped it hard against the ground. The wind was sent outward like a shockwave as I decimated the ground under my feet. Winding my arm back, I swung it in an arc and threw the ball with all of my strength, not holding back at all. The shockwaves released were strong enough to change the very landscape. The trees swayed violently due to the high-speed winds, even managing to uproot some nearby trees. My classmates struggled very hard to not be blown away. The ball easily broke the sound barrier, traveling at more than 6 times the speed of sound, and disappeared at the horizon with no signs of decrease in its ascent. The device in Aizawa-sensei's hand beeped rapidly, while my classmates looked at me with awe. With eyes wide and eyebrows raised in no less amount of amazement, Aizawa-sensei said, "Well, you have grown way too much. 40,648 meters. Class 1A. I simply walked back to them, and my eyes accidentally moved towards Uraraka. When she noticed I was looking at her, her entire face turned bright red, and was that steam coming out from the top of her head? Was the even possible? Anyway, I was partially at blame for that, as it was her that I had laid my eyes on when I was catching Koda the other night. I could feel my face heat up when that heavenly scene replayed in my mind. I walked closer to her and coughed before whispering, "I'm extremely sorry for what happened last night. It was totally unintentional." But I smirked with a sudden bout of mischievousness and continued, "I did like what I saw. You're beautiful, OCHAKOCHAN, if it was possible." Her face got even redder, and she began lightly swaying on her feet, dizzy from what I had just said. I coughed again and looked around. Good. No one had heard what I said to Uraraka, as they were too dazed by my display of strength. Aizawa-sensei didn't seem to notice what happened and continued after he gathered himself. Bakugo, you throw another ball. Your record was 705.2 meters. How much have you improved?" I looked at Katsuki curiously. He was acting very mellow and so out of character. He took a deep breath and focused hard. With a swift swing of his arm, he blasted the ball away. Only this time, there were no angry sayings or death threats said to the poor ball. Once again, Aizawa-sensei and the rest of my classmates were surprised. Looking at the device in his hand, Sensei said, 730.7 meters. There is an improvement, but not by much. He smirked menacingly and said, yes, you have been through a lot in these past 3 months. Undoubtedly, you've all grown. But it's only your techniques and minds that have matured. Well, and your bodies a bit. But as you've seen, other than Midoriya, your quirks haven't kept up with the pace. Starting today, you'll improve on your quirks. This will be so harsh you'll wish you were dead. So do your best to stay alive. And thus began the hellish training session. Unlike my classmates who were using their quirks continuously to improve them, I was doing my own training after the teachers and pussycats came to the conclusion that my quirk was at a good enough level. I already had an arsenal of moves, and my strength was nothing to scoff at. What I needed was training without the use of my quirk. Continuous usage of willpower and one for all had done something amazing to my body. My natural strength had reached beyond what a human without strength-enhancing quirk could ever achieve. I was doing my katas, mainly using my legs while fighting an imaginary opponent. So focused in my training, I barely noticed Class 1B joining us for training, while they were being overwhelmed by the bizarre member of Pussycats, Tiger, who was the only man in the group of female heroes. I was trying to improve my kicks. My attacks were powerful, no doubt about it. But there was something lacking. As I continued kicking, I felt my legs burn from fatigue. But I persevered and forced myself to continue. Faster. I picked up the pace of my kicking. From a second person's perspective, all anyone could see were blurs of my legs. Sharper. The surrounding air began moving with the flow of my kicks. Harder. Faster. Sharper. With fatigue and breathlessness clouding me, I could barely feel the air being whipped away by my kicks. Right when I was about to stop, I saw that on a tree in front of me, numerous but small gashes had appeared from the sharp air currents generated by my kicks. Panting heavily as my legs gave away from fatigue, I looked to the gashes and thought, well, I can work with this. Dinner time at night was amazing. We had to prepare our own food, and we all worked together for it. The food wasn't all that great, but given the situation, it was like some 5-star gourmet grub. Even Yaoyorozu was eating with passion. Yaomomo, you're relentless. Quite elegantly, she spoke while blowing at her spoon filled with curry rice. My quirk allows me to break fat at an atomic level and create many kinds of things. The more I eat, the more I create. Then like a kid, Ciro bluntly said. Kinda like poop. Well, that ruined the girls' dinner. Jiro made sure to thrash Ciro for it. In the boisterous atmosphere, I heard a faint voice saying, Quirks, what a waste of time. My head snapped towards the source. It was Kota. He immediately left the scene. Knowing he hadn't had dinner, I grabbed a plate of curry rice and followed him. Soon, I walked up a cliff and found him sitting at its edge brooding. I brought food for you. Feel free to dig in. Kota shot up on his feet and shouted menacingly, You, how did you know I was here? I spoke with a neutral tone. I followed you here. You just didn't notice. I figured you would be starving since you didn't have dinner. He calmed down a bit, but the hostility remained in his voice. I'm fine. I don't need any. What part of I'm not messing around with you scrubs did you not understand? This is my secret base. You're not welcome here. I raised an eyebrow at his language. Quite a dirty mouth you've got there, kid. Kota continued, getting all excited over improving your quirks. It's pathetic, really. You really want to go that far to show off your corny-ass powers? I narrowed my eyes at him and tilted my head while asking, Your parents, they were the water-type quirk users. Water heroes, right? As if getting ready to attack, Kota took a stance and shouted. Mandalay opened her big mouth. Huh? I scratched my cheek and replied, No. I'm a bit of a nerd, so I know a lot about heroes. I know the story about how your parents saved so many civilians from that villain. With utter hate, Kota said, Screw you. Calling yourselves heroes and villains, killing each other, like idiots. Bragging about your quirks. That's why you end up like that, damn idiots. My heart went cold. How could the kid diss on his parents' sacrifice like that? They died doing what they had wanted to do. No one forced them to be heroes. It was their choice to go down fighting. A noble way to go. But the kid, he was spitting on it. I had a friend who wanted to be a hero, but he was killed by someone when I was 9 years old. I vowed that day to bring every scumbag villain to justice. When quirks appeared, people resorted to crime and violence. With the police vowing against using quirks in their line of work, how do you expect anyone to keep people safe? Heroes are necessary for our society. With you rejecting quirks so harshly, you're not only hurting yourself, but are also spitting on your parents' sacrifice and their legacy. It seemed like the kid couldn't handle the truth and lashed out. Piss off. Get your ass out of here before I make you. I sighed and said before walking away, I'll leave the curry here. Next time you swear, I'll punt you hard, not caring at all that you are Mandalay's nephew. Stupid kid. Far away on an abandoned cliff. I can't take this anymore. Let's hurry up and go. It's not the time yet. Also, didn't I tell you? We don't have to overdo it. Yeah, quit trying to act like the boss. We're only here to send a warning. These heroes, riddled with holes, will fall to the earth. All for the sake of a better future. Evil was making its way towards us. On our third day of the training camp, Aizawa-sensei was busy ripping into the 5 who had failed their practical tests, while the rest of us continued our training. As he finished reprimanding Uraraka and Aoyama for barely passing, Pixie Bob excitedly said, Naya, allow me to change the topic. Let's talk about tonight's plans. We're doing an interclass test of courage. After training so hard, you get to play hard. See? Carrot and stick. We all had various reactions. Great. More terrifying activities. A bacchanal in the darkness. Really? I'm rather interested in the interclass aspect of this. Aizawa-sensei jolted us out. With that said, train your hearts out. Yes, sir. Later that night, after we ate our self-cooked dinner, all the remedial bunch were dragged away kicking and screaming by Aizawa-sensei. Everyone from 1B was already in position. Pixie Bob began explaining the rules. So, there we have it. 1B will be first up at scaring people. Students from 1A will leave in pairs of 2 every 3 minutes. In the middle of the route, there'll be a card with your name written on it. Bring it back with you as proof. There was no visible reaction from us. I sure did hear a bacchanal in the darkness from my beaked classmate who had a flair of dramatics. Pixie Bob continued, the scaring group is not allowed to directly touch anyone, but scaring tactics using any and all available quirks is permitted. The winner will be the class that not only makes the most of their creativity, but also makes the most people piss their pants with fright. Aren't they a charming bunch? And so we drew lots to decide who paired with whom. Since we were 15, one of us was bound to stay behind. Coincidentally, it was me, as everyone from 1A, except me, took their turns to go for the seemingly simple game. A sudden sense of foreboding invaded my mind. Gulping down an uneasy blob of saliva, I decided to us will of observation, just to ease myself and confirm that nothing was wrong. I felt everyone's presence in the entire valley. Nothing was amiss. Just when I was about to deactivate it, I felt 9 presences unfamiliar to me. No, there were 8, the 9th one had a will not of its own. Someone with no will of its own. Nomu. I was about to alert the pussycats when 2 of them jumped out of the forest and ambushed Pixie Bob. I wasted no time and tackled her away from a blow to her head. My action alerted the rest who were still there and hadn't left for the scaring game. The one with a big clothed weapon spoke. Tisk, damned brat. You all are an eyesore. As everyone registered what was happening, Mineta began shaking in his boots and exclaimed, Why? I thought all the necessary precautions were taken. So why? Why is the enemy here? Mandalay wasted no time and informed everyone about the villains through her telepathy. As Pixie Bob, Mandalay, and Tiger instinctively moved in front of us, guarding us against the villains, the green lizard-like villain exclaimed dramatically, Greetings UA Academy. We are the League of Villains' first strike team. The one with big lips and the huge weapon continued after him. It would have been wonderful to see little Miss Kitty's head bashed in. Tiger retorted, Over my dead body you shit. The lizard stepped forward and said, Whoa, Mag. Hold your horse's toots. And you too, Tiger, chill out. The right over life and death is decided by the word of Stain. My eyes kept getting colder as they spoke. I immediately used Will of Observation and confirmed where else had the villains attacked. While I was looking, the lizard man continued, Oh, I just remembered, you the one with the glasses. Was he referring to Ida? You were the one who brought Stain's reign of terror to an end back in Hosa City, right? I don't think I've formally introduced myself. He grabbed the hilt of a large weapon on his back. My name is Spinner. Swinging the weapon forward, The cloth around it was undone, revealing a mess of knives, machetes, daggers, and katanas tied together in a haphazard way by chains and belts. The one who carries on Stain's dream. The dude was trying to act all cool until I heard Tiger say, "Tell that to someone who gives a shit." Encore. I inwardly applauded. Or, that's what I wanted to do. But my powers were acting up again, and I was fighting hard for control. Anger, it was trying to dominate me. I didn't want to go berserk as I did in Hosa City and kill someone. I could bear hear Mandalay telling to avoid fighting and rounding up all students to safety. Then, on a lone cliff, I felt a presence near Koda. Its intent was utterly malicious. I growled towards her. "Mandalay, Koda's in trouble." Her face immediately lost color. Panic-stricken, she talked to Koda and asked him to get back to the camp. But I could feel the malicious presence closing in on him. There was no time. I put a hand on Mandalay's shoulder and said, "Let me go and bring him here. I'm fast and I can fly. Ida can round up all the students in my place." Mandalay sighed and calmed herself before nodding. I nodded back, and without giving a second glance to the villains in front of Iz, I shot up in the air. My throat rumbled with barely controlled emotions as I sped towards Koda. A few seconds later, I saw a huge cloaked figure tower towards Koda. The little kid was scared out of his wits. He ran away from the figure, but the tall man jumped and blocked Koda's path. The cloak came off, and I saw a muscled blonde man taking a powerful swing at Koda. Desperation filled me as I flew faster towards them. Once again, it happened. At one moment, I was dreading if I would be able to reach Koda in time, and in the next, I stood right in front of him. My instincts kicked in, and I immediately pushed my arms forward towards the man. A bundle of green-colored shields shimmered between his fist and me. The man's fist collided with the shields, but only managed to break the first few. In the meantime, I managed to take Koda away on the other side of the cliff. The little kid was shivering from fright and kept mumbling about his mom and dad. When I took another look at the villain, it all suddenly clicked. The villain was none other than Muscular, the one who had killed Koda's parents. I looked down at Koda and said, "Koda, I want you to run all the way to the camp while I'll stay here and stop him. Mandalay is there. She'll keep you safe. Do you understand?" But Koda was too shaken to respond. Muscular was towards us with swagger and said, "You'll stop me while he runs away, you say? Ha 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 ha." As expected, the feel of a true hero candidate, ready to parade the face of justice anywhere, anytime. As I was guarding Koda behind me, the villain continued, "You're the one called Midoriya, aren't you? What perfect timing. I had been ordered to start things off by killing your sorry ass." Muscle fibers began sprouting out of his body. I guess that's where his alias came from. The boss really hates your guts for scarring his face during USJ attack. Then, in a mad rush of craziness, he shouted, "I'll kill you, right after I take my time torturing you, that is. Let me see you bleed." It didn't even take a moment for armament to ripple around my body, covering me from head to toe, making me look like a man carved from jade. His fist descended to the left side of my face, and I wrapped my arms around my head to endure the blow. Muscular was strong. His punch made my arms tingle with dull pain as I was thrown towards the rocky mountainside of the cliff, slightly embedding me into it. "Ah, whoops," the mad villain said as he dashed towards me. "I almost forgot. If you know, then tell me, where is that Bakuga kid? After all, I've got a job to finish." He punched me again and threw me to the other side of the cliff. "They are after Katsuki." "Why?" "You can just say, I don't know. That okay with you?" Well then, while I was still in the air, Muscular slammed his leg into my gut and sent me crashing down. He was strong and his attacks hurt a lot, but I had his attention. That's all that mattered, keeping him away from Koda. As I struggled to get back on my feet, Muscular gawked at me and asked in annoyance, "Huh? Why aren't you bleeding? I want to have some fun and watch you bleed. What did you earlier? That you'll stop me. Get up and try it then." I coughed and tried to catch my breath. If he wanted a fight, then a fight he will get. Roaring with determination, I jumped towards him and grabbing the sides of his face, I rammed my knee into his mug. His head snapped back as spit and sweat showered off of him. I flipped in the air and slammed my fist into his nose, that was already broken from my knee strike. Muscular fell down with a thud, and I landed a few feet away from him. "How does it feel when you're the one who's bleeding?" I asked in a menacing voice. Muscular began cackling. "What an annoying brat you are. Makes me want to rip you apart." Enhancing his body with his muscle augmentation quirk, Muscular swiftly dashed towards and punched hard. One for all. 50%, I countered his punch with my own. The muscles around his arm kept on adding as he pushed forward. Ha 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 ha. You are strong, but not strong enough. With a final push, he sent me tumbling across the cliff. My quirk is muscle augmentation, enabling me to augment the muscle fibers that sit beneath my skin and enhance my speed and strength. What do you say to that? HRM. Nothing. You are weak. Seeing your fallen state makes me laugh. You'll stop me. How exactly? Don't go spouting off hollow words because you think they sound right. You should worry, Abu. I didn't let him finish. His voice was so annoying that it was starting to give me a headache. I practically teleported in front of his face and stuffed a big piece of rock in his mouth while saying, "You talk too much." Spinning upwards, I kicked under his jaw and sent him flying. As I followed his trajectory, he snarled as he spat dirt and broken pieces of rock from his bleeding mouth. "I'll make you pay for that, you green shit." I caught up to him and making a club with my hands, I smashed it down on his face, sending him pummeling down into the cliff. Thinking that he was done for, I walked towards Kota and said, "Let's go." But before he could grab my hand, Muscular swiped his leg at the side of my body and sent me flying. Because I thought that he was taken care of, I had dropped my guard and relaxed my armament a bit. I was hurt and I could feel the stinging pain from my sides. When Muscular was about to attack me again, in a sudden bout of courage, Kota threw a rock at the back of his head. Kota had tears rolling down his face as he asked, "Waterhorse, my mom and dad, did you torment them before you killed them?" I internally panicked. "No. The hell are you trying, you stupid kid?" Muscular recalled for a moment and said, "Seriously? Their kid? This must be fate. Waterhorse, those two took an eye from me." Kota shouted, "It's all your fault. It's because of people like you that things always turn out like this." Muscular sneered, "Little snot-nosed brats like you are always looking to pass the blame on someone. That's no good. For example, I'm not holding a grudge for my eye. I simply wanted to kill. And those two wanted to stop me. Our desires intersected, and what happened was the result of that. The fault lies with those who try to act even though they're incapable of doing anything effective. That pretty much sums up your pathetic mom and dad." "Enough." I jumped at Muscular and snarled, "The fault is yours. It's not a matter of what you can or can't do. For heroes, risking our lives and walking the walk is our job." I mustered all of my strength and punched forward. One for all. 75% Muscular was sent crashing into the mountainside. This time, I was certain that he was dealt with. But, just to be sure, I checked him with observation. He was still awake. All the force behind my punch was absorbed by his muscles. Muscular stood up and looked at me with insane glee, starting off with a jab. "Huh. Not half bad, Midoriya." White-hot anger erupted in the form of wild conqueror's will, and the very ground began shaking. To hell with limitations. One for all. 100% like a shroud, lightning rippled all over my armament-covered body. Playtime's over. You're stronger than I thought. So now it's time for my serious face. I breathed out and said to Kota, "Stay back, kid. Not too far from me or he'll come after you. Just 7 to 8 steps away. When I stop him, run and don't look back." Kota was shocked and asked, "Wait, you're really not going to take him head on, are you? It's useless. Your attacks didn't have much effect on him last time. And now, he's getting stronger." Muscular removed the artificial eye from its socket and pocketed it in his trousers. Almost the entirety of his body was covered by layers upon layers of muscle fibers. Making a mad dash towards us, he said, "Again, you think you can stop me?" Muscular tackled me with all of his strength. It felt like I was trying to stop a speeding truck. Straining my muscles, I held him back and shouted, "It's okay. There's no way he's getting past me. So run away, Kota. You little shit. This is so much fun. Shut the hell up." Kota was too shocked to run away. He fell down on his butt and asked, his voice trembling with emotion, "Why? Why would you go this far, when you don't know a thing about me? Why?" I mustered up my strength and roared, "Because heroes are the ones who give a damn." With a mighty push, Muscular was sent stumbling back. Tempest kick. I focused my strength into my leg and swung it into a downward arc. The air transformed into a scythe and cut Muscular's muscle fibers apart. His head was exposed. I wasted no time and focused my power into my fist. "This is my judgment for all your crimes, Muscular. You'll never hurt anyone ever again. Like an ethereal power, a gigantic fist crashed on the top of Muscular's head. My willpower seeped into his skull, targeting the motor area of his brain, and destroyed the neurons. Because I'm taking your power away from you. The cliff under his feet caved in, and Muscular got buried under tons of rubble. He was finally defeated. I looked back at Kota. I didn't know what was going on in his mind, and neither did I care. He was safe, that's all that mattered. I bent down in front of him and said, "Put your hands over my shoulders and grab on tight. We don't need to give your aunt even more worries." I had to hurry. This was just the beginning of a battle, and I feared something big was about to happen. Something that would affect the lives of many. As I was flying with Kota to Aizawa-sensei, I asked him, "Kota, do you have a quirk?" "Huh, yeah, it's same as my mom and dad's quirk." I nodded. "We'll need your help, Kota. The villains have set the forest on fire. With the fire spreading, all of the ways out will become dead ends. We need your quirk, Kota. I may have saved you, but we need you to save all of us." Soon, I saw Aizawa-sensei speeding through the forest. I landed near him and said, "Sensei, there's a lot I have to tell you. But first, I need to talk to Mandalay. Take care of Kota for me. He has a water quirk. You have to protect him." Aizawa-sensei narrowed his eyes and asked, "How did you get a bruise on your face?" I was a little startled. "Huh, maybe I got it when I was hit by that villain. How was he able to hit you anyway?" I rubbed the back of my head as I quickly explained. "Well, the villain was very strong. If I dodged his attacks, the mere shockwaves of his punches would have thrown Kota off the cliff. I had to tank his attacks and reduce the strength of my armor ability to absorb the blows." "Fine." I looked up in the sky and nodded to Sensei. "I'll be off." "Wait, Midoriya. Also, tell her this." I zoomed through the air and went back to Mandalay. They were still fighting the villains. "Spinner," the lizard man exclaimed as he swung his third-grade version of Samahata sword at Mandalay. "You're a stubborn one, you phony. Hurry up and get purged already." I flew towards him and smashed through his stupid sword while saying, "You're the one who needs to piss off. You wanna be Stain's bitch." I swiftly turned around and kicked him in the gut, sending him flying towards the other villain. Turning towards Mandalay, I said, "Kota's fine, Mandalay. I have a message from Aizawa-sensei. Use your telepathy to tell everyone." As I spoke, Mandalay relayed the message to everyone. "Students of Class A and B, I Professional Hero Eraserhead, hereby authorize you all for combat." When I was about to leave, asked to relay one more message. "Mandalay, relay this to everyone too. The villains, or at least one of them, are after Katsuki. They are here for him. Please use your telepathy again." When the tall villain with big lips heard me, he immediately jumped towards me, saying, "This won't do. This kid needs to die." I scoffed at the villain and swatted him towards Spinner like a little fly. "Piss off." There was no time to deal with those grunts. I flew high up in the sky and spread my observation throughout the forest. Katsuki, Todoroki, and a guy from 1B were facing a villain. Itsuka and Tetsu were walking towards a villain, who was the one behind the poison gas. Uraraka and Tsuyu were also fighting a villain. Shoji was fleeing from Tokoyami, whose quirk had gone berserk. The Noma was aimlessly wandering around as Yaoyorozu and a guy from 1B were hiding from it. In a faraway area, 2 more villains were lurking. Perhaps they were planning something. There was no one in an area of hundreds of feet below on the ground. I smirked. It was time to mess up with their plan. With a yell, I released a huge pulse of Conqueror's Will. Soon, my wills began affecting the villains. One villain standing far away immediately fell unconscious. The 2 fighting Tiger and Mandalay fell down on their knees and began heavily sweating. There was a moment of quiet in the forest. I hadn't used the full extent of my power as I didn't have absolute control over it. If I had used it, I feared the pulse would have been so powerful that I would have killed the villains, all the while giving permanent psychological injuries to everyone else. Then, the Nomu that was aimlessly walking around jumped towards me in an amazing show of strength. So it was looking for me. Our fists collided with a bang high up in the air as my entire body was glowing with a bright green aura. Those Nomus were an incredible creation. If only they weren't created from humans, but instead by robotics, they could have been a boon against evil. But they had a glaring weakness. All Nomus were devoid of their wills. They had no consciousness of their own. They just followed their innate battle instincts and did what their minds were programmed to do, which meant that they never dodged any attacks thrown at them. As my punch canceled out his attack, I maneuvered in the air and smashed my knee in its gut, send it flying higher in the air. I instantly followed behind, and as it reached the highest point, I made a club with my fists, and with a mighty roar, I smashed its face, sending it crashing towards the ground thousands of feet below. But I wasn't done. As the Noma was zooming towards the ground, the green aura around my body flared up like a wildfire, and I rammed my body into its gut like a battering ram and crashed into the ground with a thunderous bang. The Noma was shrieking in pain. Making a decision to finish it, I bombarded it with a storm of fists that decimated the nearby forest just with the shockwaves. When I finally stopped, the Noma was nothing but a broken husk of flesh. It was still alive, given that I could sense its heart beating in his battered chest. But there were no movements. Suddenly, I sensed Tokoyami rushing towards me. His quirk had gone out of his control, and I had the perfect solution for it. As dark shadow came blasting through the trees, I punched it with a fist of judgment and sent it back from whence it came. Without allowing it to get back up, I placed my hand on its head and blasted it with a concentrated pulse of Conqueror's will. Calm down. It was immediately subdued. Tokoyami panted heavily as he looked up at me and said, "Midoriya." Huff huff, thanks. I was trying very hard to control Dark Shadow, but he wasn't listening. Suddenly, from the bushes, Shoji came running towards us. "Tokoyami, Midoriya, you guys are all right." I didn't respond as my eyes immediately found themselves looking at the grievance injury on Shoji. I narrowed my eyes and asked, "Shoji, what happened to your arm?" Tokoyami dropped his head down while gritting his teeth as Shoji explained their encounter with the villain. Fortunately, it was one of the dupli arms that was cut off and not his main arm. It could be grown back. It was at that time when I felt the familiar aura of Kurojiri in the vicinity. He was opening a portal. The villains, Spinner and his companion, who had been tied up by the pussycats, disappeared into a portal, startling the heroes. One by one, the villains began disappearing in portals. I felt a sudden foreboding of danger, and without saying another word, I blasted off towards Katsuki. There, in front of me, Katsuki was struggling against a villain who had some kind of quirk that allowed him to extend his teeth out of his mouth like sharp blades and change the direction of his attacks at will. I took the villain by surprise and broke his teeth with an overpowered kick to his mouth, sending him zooming through the darkness of the night. A portal suddenly appeared behind Katsuki, and a pair of hands grabbed his arms and began pulling him inside the portal. My ears began ringing from a sudden rush of blood to my brain. All I could think of was to prevent Katsuki from being taken away. I teleported to Katsuki and pried the hands off him. It all happened way too quickly for me to react. The last thing I remembered was Katsuki's terror-stricken face as he desperately tried to reach for me. "Izuku!" The world blackened in front of my eyes. I felt my head getting lighter as the ringing in my ears intensified. After that, I fell unconscious. I didn't know for how long was I unconscious. I could hear some people talking around me. Keeping my eyes closed, I listened. Hey, can I taste his blood? I wonder what he'll taste like. Himiko, the boss wants him alive and awake. Well, maybe he'll wake up when I cut him up." Quietly, I took a whiff of the air. The smell, it was that of alcohol. I was in a bar, or a club, which didn't have many visitors. It was either at a distant and secluded area, or had been closed for a long time. Why are we keeping him alive anyway? He was among those who took down Stain. I say we slice him into pieces and send his head to UA. The boss, Shigaraki, he wanted to keep me alive. I have to inform someone, but how? Also, I had to know where they were keeping me. Using observation, I looked for an easy target. I had learnt from the Nomus that if I could overpower someone's will, I could establish some form of control over their bodies. I know, it would be so easy to abuse that for evil and have my way with people. But I wasn't an evil person. So, I decided to target a bird or a little rodent, something that I could easily overpower, something of very low intelligence. After I momentarily looked around through observation, I found a bird perched on the roof of a nearby building. I shook away the pain and guilt I felt when I took control over the bird while the poor animal fluttered violently. I had to be careful. A little fumble on my part could destroy the bird's will and turn it into something that couldn't be described as alive after I relinquished my control over it. Under the commands of my will, the bird craned its neck to look for any boards or signs that could tell me where I was. "Shut up, Spinner. Don't try to get out of this. You owe me 500 yen. Soon, the The bird found itself in front of a local shop with its address painted at the bottom of its board. Kamino, Yokohama. I was in a bar in the Kamino ward of Yokohama City. But how will I inform anyone about my location? I racked my brain for an answer while relinquishing my control over the bird. Fortunately, the bird wasn't affected at all, saving me from the guilt of manipulating something to its death. Suddenly, I thought of the pussycats. Mandalay was a telepath and Ragdoll was able to sense everything in the surroundings, kind of like my observation. And they could communicate with each other through their minds if they were close enough. Could I? Gotta activate one for all and increase the range of my willpower's reach. I kept my breathing steady and deep. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. I activated one for all and focused to keep it around my nervous system. Soon, I began using my will of observation and tried to spread it as far away as I possibly could. There, like a faded ray of light in the darkness, I could feel Mandalay's presence right around the edge of the limits of my observation. Next, I used Conqueror's will and tested her will. Due to the large distance, my probe was very weak, but it was noticeable. Mandalay suddenly perked up when she heard faint voices in her head. Me, Ryazu. Pixie Bob looked at her questioningly. Midoya. IZUKU. Pixie Bob, I think someone is trying to talk to me through telepathy. Pixie Bob exclaimed. Is it Ragdoll? Mandalay shook her head and concentrated. Midoriya IZUKU. I'm Midoriya IZUKU. Mandalay. Mandalay gasped and turned towards Pixie Bob. Get everyone here. It's Midoriya IZUKU. He's trying to contact me through telepathy. Go, hurry. Midoriya, Mandalay here. I can hear you. I was about to sigh, but held it in at the last moment. The villains were still there. I couldn't alert them that I was awake. Mandalay, they are keeping me in a foreclosed bar in the Kamino ward of Yokohama. I think this is their hideout. The villains are all here and talking among each other. I could perceive her sigh as she replied. All right, we'll be there as soon as we can. We'll save you, Midoriya. After hesitating for a moment, she continued. Is Ragdoll there with you? My mind went blank for a moment. Ragdoll was taken? Snapping back to my senses, I looked for her throughout Kamino. What I found froze the blood in my veins, metaphorically. Mandalay, Ragdoll isn't here. She is being kept somewhere else in Kamino. The place is full of Nomus. I think they are trying to convert her into one. You need to hurry. I felt Mandalay gasp in horror as she quickly broke the connection. All I could do was wait, or cause some mayhem. Pixie Bob barged in the meeting that was being held among the heroes of UA. They had just gotten information about the hideout of the villains from Detective Tsukachi Naomesa. Someone had identified the villain Dabi entering an abandoned building that used to be a bar in Kamino Ward. Without waiting for someone to ask, she exclaimed. Midoriya IZUKU had made a telepathic connection with Mandalay. The heroes quickly followed her out. Mandalay was running towards them with a terrified expression. Midoriya is being kept in a foreclosed bar in Kamino Ward. He told me Ragdoll is kept somewhere with a lot of Nomus. They are trying to make Ragdoll a Nomu. We have to save them. The heroes immediately began mobilizing. Meanwhile, Yaoyorozu informed the heroes about the tracker she and Aways from Class B had planted on the incapacitated Nomu I had left behind. The villains had managed to take the Nomu away with them. As the heroes gathered around to conduct the raid, my foolish classmates were devising their own rescue operation for me. It still warms my heart when I recall what they had done to rescue me. Back in the hideout, I stirred awake and groaned. A girlish squeal stung into my ears. He's awake. Hey, look, can I make him bleed now? I glanced around the bar and probed their presences. All villains who had participated in the attack were present, with the addition of Kurojiiri and Shigaraki. They were watching a press conference on the TV where the UA staff was answering the media's questions. Shigaraki turned towards me and said, Midoriya IZUKU, we wanted to capture Bakugo Katsuki, but you thwarted our plans. A small inconvenience. I kept staring at him impassively. Shigaraki spread his arms wide and continued with flair. Look over there. He gestured at the TV. Why are heroes being criticized? Their response was just a little too slow. Is it because it's their job to protect the kids? Everybody makes a mistake or two, like your parents made you. Heroes are under some pretty strict standards, huh? Why is he even telling me all this? Spinner, who was standing against the wall, said, the moment that protecting people began to merit some compensation, heroes were not heroes anymore. That's Stain's teaching. What an idiot. Go ride his schlong then. Stain's bitch. Shigaraki continued, the queerness of converting human life into money and selfish pursuits. Citizens who criticize the losers who instead should be cheered on. Our battle is one of those questions. What is a hero? What is justice? Is this society really just? We want people to think about these things. Oh, I tried. Trust me, I really tried to, but I couldn't hold back and laughed hysterically. Oh man, you guys are truly a bunch of idiots. What is this, some intellectual debate on what a hero is supposed to be? Asshole, I'm held captive here, someone who is your enemy. And instead of trying to get some information out of me, you are trying to lure me to your side? Do you even know shit about me? I looked at Spinner and continued. Heroes are not heroes because they earn money from it. They earn money so that they can be full-time heroes and protect the citizens from megalomaniacs like your boss. How are they supposed to feed their families if they don't earn money? Freaking imbecile. Without giving anyone a chance to react, I broke through my bindings and blasted off towards Kurogyri, catching everyone by surprise. I wrapped my arm around his throat and grabbed his head in a vice grip. The rest of these might be cannon fodder for you, but this dude, he's important, isn't he? My quirk allows me to ignore defenses against physical damage, like your warp bitch. Want to see what his brains will look like if I crush his head? Believe me, I'm strong enough to do it. Right then, someone knocked on the door of the bar. I smirked when I felt who it was through observation. Rejoice, bastards. Your daddy's here to kick your ass. As All Might burst in through the door, the villains were overwhelmed within a blink of an eye. The heroes were fast. Kamui Woods acted quickly and captured the villains with his special move. When a villain tried to burn the wood holding him down, Gran Torino swooped behind him and knocked him out with a kick behind his head. All Might said in his booming voice, between the sturdy Kamui Woods and the speedy Gran Torino, the villain alliance stands no chance. For we are here. The heroes rushed in one by one. Edshot took an instant to mess with Kurogyri while I was holding his head and took care of him. I could sense that more had surrounded the bar, and with Kurogyri incapacitated, all paths of escape for the villains were closed. I watched with silent triumph as Shigaraki began losing control. He was absolutely terrified at the sight of All Might. But the fight wasn't over. In all the suddenness of the retaliation by the heroes, I dropped my guard. It was a grave error. Suddenly, I could feel some form of liquid rising from my throat. It was extremely unpleasant. Unable to keep it inside, I vomited the liquid out. Similar things were happening with the villains. Out of nowhere, numerous Nomu appeared out of strange portals made of the same liquid that I was vomiting out. The realization dawned upon me, but it was too late as I was whisked away from the bar along with the rest of the villains. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in ruins of what looked like a lab. The whole place was saturated with the imposing and intimidating aura of the man standing in front of me. One by one, the villains also fell out of the portals. In the meantime, I spread my observation to the surroundings and found out that I was at the place where they manufactured Nomu. Yes, manufactured, because the sheer number of those incomplete Nomu boggled my mind. It felt like the villains were creating an army, but all that could wait. The man in front of me was being addressed as Sensei by Shigaraki. I narrowed my eyes and decided to test his will. And when I did, a lot of things suddenly made sense. The man's will was the same as that controlled all the Nomu I had encountered. Every single one of them was controlled by him. I pushed on. There was something else. Something horrifying. The man had numerous fragments of wills of other people. Midoriya IZUKU. You really did a number on Tamura during our incursion in USJ. He had stolen those fragments from people, subdued them and shackled them to himself. Stolen fragments of wills. Shigaraki Sensei. Control Nomus who had multiple quirks. When I finally realized who the man was, my breath stagnated as my thought process halted. He was the mastermind behind the League of Villains, the nemesis of every one for all user. All for one. I immediately activated my quirk, ready to fight, even though I knew I was nowhere near his strength. His will was indomitable. It felt like an impenetrable shield with the strongest chains ever holding the fragments to it. Among the fragments, I could feel a fragment from Ragdoll. He had stolen her quirk. My breath got erratic, and I zoned out, unable to hear what anyone was saying. Such was the extent of the effect his aura was having on me. I felt suffocated. Suddenly, All Might came blasting towards us and tackled All for One, decimating the ground below him. But surprisingly, All for One held his ground. No, he didn't even budge. I'm going to make you give everything back. All for One. You're going to kill me again, All Might? The smile on All Might's face that always reassured everyone was absent. It didn't take him even a moment for All for One to deduce that All Might had become weak. As I observed, All for One drained the power from some fragments chained to his will and created a devastating wind attack, sending All Might flying through dozens of buildings. He then told Shigaraki and the other villains to escape and take me with them. Using another stolen quirk, All for One forcefully activated Kurogiri's quirk as All Might came back to stop All for One. I finally snapped back to my senses. Among all the chaos, I sensed that Katsuki and some other classmates of mine were hiding behind a wall. If All for One saw them, he will attack them to further provoke All Might. The villains. I can't let them escape. Furthermore, All Might isn't fighting with his entire strength. He's holding back because I'm here. I need to do something. I chuckled lightly, attracting everyone's attention to me. Escape? Not while I'm here. I didn't hold back and blasted my surroundings with the entire strength of my Conqueror's will, making sure the attack was aimed only at the villains. My attack was by no means weak. It cracked the very ground beneath me, shattered the glass of numerous buildings, and sent a lot of rubble flying outwards. All the villains who were awake fell down like bowling pins. But it didn't even chip the impenetrable shield that was All for One's will. The boss of the villains looked around and said to me, I felt that. Your quirk is strong. Come over here. Suddenly, his fingers transformed into cords, and he attacked me with the intent of grabbing me and pulling me towards him. But All Might stopped his attack. You won't harm him in my presence. All Might grabbed the cords and held them tightly. Taking advantage of it, I dashed towards All for One and punched at his face with a fist of judgment. But All for One stopped it with little effort. Your strength is comparable to All Might, but it's not good enough, Midoriya Izuku. I gritted my teeth and pushed on, not intending to give up. All for One whipped his other arm and threw All Might away before retracting the cords back. You wouldn't mind if I take your quirk, would you? I responded with a snarl as he brought his hand closer. But before he could begin taking my quirk, many things happened at the same time. The wall behind which Katsuki and others were hiding was blown away, and a massive pillar of ice emerged from behind it. Kirishima, Ida and Katsuki sped on the ice pillar and flew into the air over us. Meanwhile, my quirk reacted to the distress I was feeling and teleported me behind All for One as his hand was inches away from taking my quirk away. It worked to my benefit as it surprised the villain. I could hear Katsuki shout Izuku. That was my only chance to escape. It was All Might's fight, one that he had to put an end to. I had no right to interfere. But before I did, I snarled at All for One. Here's a parting F you rotten old fossil of a prick. Moving my finger in a horizontal arc towards his back, I created a streak of green aura which shattered into countless shards. Then, the pieces hailed at All for One's back, with no chance for the villain to dodge. Needle Mountain held the shards of aura pierced through his torso and riddled him with holes as I flew towards my friends and grabbed Katsuki's hand. I had gravely wounded All for One. All I could do was have faith in the hero everyone admired. I looked back at All Might and conveyed my thoughts with a simple gesture. And from the smirk on his face, I knew he understood. I've evened the odds for you. You better win, All Might. All Might's battle with All for One showed me what the top hero was truly capable of. But All for One was not one to be scoffed at. He knew exactly how to use the quirks he had stolen. The battle of the two behemoths was causing the nature itself to bend to their wills. Whipping violent currents of air with nothing but their fists, the two attacked one another like titans of the myth. The entire country, and perhaps millions in the entire world, watched with bated breaths as All Might fought against the odds. With my heart pounding with uncertainty and a little bit of fear, I watched as All Might's weakened form was revealed to the world. He was already at his limit, yet All for One stood tall despite the injuries he received from my somewhat of a sneak attack. But All Might did not yield. He pushed his body beyond its limits and dashed towards his adversary, using the last embers of the quirk his master had bestowed upon him. Sacrificing his good arm, All Might put his entire being into his other arm that had been shattered, and with a last farewell to his quirk, All Might smashed his fist into All for One's face. That day marked the end of an era because on that day, the symbol of peace, the greatest hero of his generation, All Might, retired from being a professional hero. All for One was defeated and lay unconscious at All Might's feet as the man raised his broken and bleeding fist up in victory. Then, he dropped his arm down and pointed towards the camera held by the reporters and said, "You're next. For the world." Those words were a warning to every uncertain villain. His stance was that of an unbreakable pillar. Yet to me, they held an entirely different meaning. My time has come to an end. That moment has forever been etched to my memory. The country may have lost its symbol of peace, but to me, he would always remain All Might because it wasn't his quirk that made him the man I idolized. It was his principles, his conviction that he upheld. Till the very day he died. All for One was taken to Tartarus, the prison for criminals on a death row. Meanwhile, the country was in a state of chaos. Even though the mastermind was caught, Shigaraki still managed to escape while the people lost their symbol of peace. All Might's weakened form was revealed to the world. The symbol of peace that will never fall was no more, neither to the civilians and nor to the villains. While Katsuki and the rest went back to their homes, I was taken by the police for questioning, standard protocol. I told them everything that had transpired as Mom sat beside me, barely holding her tears back. I returned to our apartment with Mom in a police car. Neither of us talked, too occupied by our thoughts and emotions. Just as I entered through the door, Mom grabbed me into a crushing hug and wept. She was so scared. I could feel her body tremble as she reassured herself that her baby was all right, kissing me all over my face over and over again. I stood quietly and accepted her display of motherly affection. I knew she was still putting up a strong front for me. I knew that she'd cry herself to sleep, yet I was helpless, unable to think of any words that could soothe her. All I could do was hug her back. I blamed myself for my incompetence and selfishness. How could I be a hero if I caused so much pain to my own mother? As I held her trembling and crying self in a hug, I vowed to never make her suffer through such distress ever again. Mom fell asleep while we were standing at the door of our apartment. She hadn't slept or eaten for more than a day. I tucked her into her bed and went to my room. Finally, the fatigue took over and I collapsed into my bed. I woke up the next day to my phone vibrating on my bedside. I looked at the screen and immediately shot up from my bed. It was a call from All Might. I flew towards Dagoba Beach as he had asked. I still didn't know what I would say to him. Should I try to encourage him? Was I too naive to even think that he'd need some consoling? As those uncertain thoughts swirled in my mind, I saw All Might standing at the beach. The majority of his body was bandaged. "Ah, you are here. Took you long enough." As I landed in front of him, I said, "All Might, I'm sorry But the words died out in my mouth because out of nowhere, he punched me in the face. "What are you apologizing for, young Midoriya? I came here to inform you that I'm retiring. My body is no longer in a state to fight anymore." He then transformed for a brief moment and punched in the air, only to deflate and comically spit blood. He stopped and continued, "The last embers of one for all have gone out. On top of that, I'm not able to maintain my muscle form anymore. And you, not only you were able to get out of harm's way without being hurt, you also helped me by giving All for One some very bad injuries." He crouched down and held me in a one-armed hug. "I'm incredibly proud of you, and I'm happy that I chose you as my successor. From here on out, I'm entirely devoting myself to your development. Despite my condition, we'll do our best, okay?" I couldn't hold back anymore and cried. Even though I knew, it was at that moment I realized. The weak lingering pain in my cheek told me but one thing. It was the end of the age of All Might. I spent most of my time at home meditating during the break we were given to recover from the villain attack and the subsequent events. I had tested the will of a man who had tempered his own for hundreds of years. I had a clear vision in my mind of the target I had to surpass. I was able to sate the worries of my friends. But deep down, I knew the incident changed them in one way or the other. Even though All for One was defeated and arrested, his protege, Shigaraki, was still at large, and so was his League of Villains. I was feeling an uneasy need for urgency. The more he was allowed to remain free, the more troublesome he got. After the attack at the summer camp, UA decided to have all the students live at the campus itself for our own safety. One by one, the teachers visited all the students for permission from our parents to allow us to move into dorms. I was a little nervous as All Might himself was coming to talk to Mom, and I was afraid that after all that had happened, she won't allow me to relocate to UA. Mom was incredibly warm towards All Might when he knocked on our door. As I poured tea for the three of us, All Might modestly thanked me and began. As you may already know, Mrs. Midoriya, that because of recent events, the principal of UA has decided to relocate all the students to the campus for their safety. I am here to ask for your consent in allowing young Midoriya to move into UA dorms. Mom patiently took a sip of her tea and breathed out before replying. Since the day my IZUKU joined your school, he has been under constant threat. First, the attack at USJ. Izu faced something terrible and had to fight against an absolute monstrosity until you arrived to handle it. Then the hero killer Stain. Izu had to take the matter in his own hands and save his friend because the heroes were incompetent. Staring into All Might's eyes, she continued, now this. Izu foiled the plans of Villain League to abduct Katsuki and was taken by villains. He took down a dangerous criminal by himself and even defeated a Nomu while the heroes were occupied by some crooks. He had to face their leader, whom even you barely managed to defeat. That too after Izu gave him serious wounds. How can you expect me to believe that you or any other hero will keep him safe when he's out there fighting your battles? He, who isn't even a hero yet has proven to be more of a hero than any of you. I was shell-shocked. Even though I wanted to, I had nothing to say to refute her. Mom continued, I cannot stop Izu from pursuing this profession, but as a mother, I worry that one day he may not return. I have always supported him, but I cannot live in constant fear of losing him before he's even ready to stand on his own feet. Can you guarantee that he'll be safer if he moves to UA? All Might took a few moments to absorb the damage done by Mom's words. He steadied his breathing and replied, Mrs. Midoriya, I can understand if you have little faith in me and in UA for properly taking care of your son, and you have every right to deny his relocation. All Might got up from his seat, and before I could comprehend what he wanted to say, he got down on his knees and bowed in front of Mom, saying, but give me one chance of being a mentor of young Midoriya. He has the potential of being someone great, and I want to do everything in my power to nurture him into a great hero. I'll lay down my life before I let any kind of danger befall upon him. This I vow to you. I was stupefied seeing All Might bow in front of Mom and hearing him make that vow. Too overwhelmed by her emotions and awe at All Might's bow, Mom fell on her knees and said, no. The reason Izu ever wanted to be a hero was because he idolized you. You are part of what drives him to push himself so hard every single day. I cannot ask you to lay down your life. I cannot accept your vow. It's not like I have something against UA. All I want is for IZUKU to be happy. You mustn't put your life on the line, no matter what. Please keep on living and nurturing him to the fullest of his potential. If you can promise me that, then I will not stand in your way. All Might immediately responded, I promise. Without looking at me, Mom said, and you, IZUKU, be the hero you vowed to be. I've seen it, you know? I've seen what you wrote down on the day Kaneda-kun died. She turned around and looked into my wide eyes, her hardened gaze resolute. You've been holding back a lot. IZUKU, if there are villains as evil as those of the League of Villains, you have to let loose of what holds you back and become the bane of the wicked. I stared back at her and grunted with purpose. I promise, Mom. I'll stop holding back. I'll become a symbol, feared by the villains. I'll become their bane. In the middle of August of that year, I moved out of my home. Our dorm was named as Heights Alliance, which I built in just 3 days, thanks to Cementos. Most of my classmates were excited, but that excitement was squashed by a grave-looking Aizawa-sensei. First of all, what's important is that all of you have managed to gather here safely. I'm going to give you a quick briefing about the dorms. But before that, just one thing. Bakugo, Kirishima, Ida, Todoroki, and Yaoyorozu. You 5 were present on that evening at that place. You took it upon yourselves to proceed to the site of Midoriya's rescue. His eyes swept across the faces of everyone else, and he continued, looking at your classmates, they understand the weight of your behavior in deciding to go there. A lot of things have been set aside in light of what transpired. But I will say this, if it weren't for All Might's sudden retirement, with the exception of Midoriya, Jairu, and Hagakure, I would have expelled all of you. Regardless of the reason, the fact that you betrayed our trust doesn't change. From now on, do me a favor and follow the established procedures and act accordingly. I'd really appreciate that. Having said what he wanted, Aizawa-sensei walked away, leaving us in a somber mood. The sad and guilty expression on everyone's faces struck the chords of my heart. Breathing out, I exclaimed, he really doesn't know how to hold back. I walked ahead and turned around to face Katsuki. What's got you so sad all of a sudden? TSK, you look less annoying when you're scowling like a dumbass. Katsuki's face immediately scrunched in a frown as he shot back. You ungrateful ass. I shouldn't have bothered trying to save your butt. Damn right. I could have handled the situation myself. I don't need a weak-ass shit like you getting in trouble only for me to jump and save you. Confused and annoyed, Katsuki exclaimed. Ah! I smirked and raised my fist facing him. The villains wanted you, but I ruined their plan by replacing you. You returned the favor by coming all the way to Kamino to rescue me. Let's call it even. Katsuki grinned and bumped my fist with his. Before he could begin gloating, I said, Next time do me a favor and be more aware of your surroundings than acting like a dog without a leash. I ignored his, what did you call me? I grabbed Kaminari and him and took them behind the bushes. It wasn't hard to make the Pikachu fry his own brain. Jamming we was enough to lighten the mood of everyone. It was kinda needed. After all, we all had suffered from a terrible ordeal, and the verbal thrashing by IZUKU hadn't helped at all. I had a lot of things on my mind. So, I didn't take much time to set my room up. It wasn't much, but unlike what many would expect from an All Might fanboy, I didn't put a single poster of his on my walls. Most of the posters decorating the walls of my room were of, Midnight, Mirko, Ryukyu, Mandalay, Pixie Bob, Ragdoll, Sirius, MT Lady, Uwabami and other heroines. All from my best collection. That is, the collection I couldn't take out at home. Can't really blame a teenager for dreaming. That was a small part of the reason why I didn't join that room visiting game the girls had proposed. The major reason was, I wanted to spend some time alone. With the posters. It was a fun night. The next day, I woke up with a clear head. The posters of hot heroines certainly helped a lot with uplifting my mood. As usual, the broody Aizawa-sensei arrived and addressed us. Originally, you all were supposed to get your provisional hero licenses after the summer camp. Unfortunately, the villains disrupted the plan. So, now our first objective is earning a license for you all. The license will grant you permission to intervene when people's lives are at stake. Obviously, this qualification carries immense weight. It goes without saying that the examination required to qualify is incredibly strict. That is why, from today onwards, we'll be having you all come up with 2 of your very own special moves. I was very much excited about the training, creating my own special moves. It may sound cringy, but it did help with building up the enthusiasm for us to come up with new ways of using our quirks. As we reached Gamma Gym, Cementos introduced the building as the Dreamland, where he manipulated the cemented floor and created a terrain suitable for all of us to train in. Special moves, as the teachers explained, were essential for us to have a chance at getting our provisional licenses. The examination was incredibly tough, and the officials tested a variety of skills to determine if a student was ready to do fieldwork. Among everything, combat was the most heavily considered skill. Since our summer camp was abruptly brought to an end, we were given 10 days to train at the boot camp to further develop our quirks and work on creating special moves, which apparently was the objective of the summer camp. Soon, everyone began working with a clone of ectoplasm. The clone with me stood silently and listened as I explained what I wanted to work on. My quirk has numerous applications. One of them allows me to psychologically overpower others. I used it to knock out several villains during the USJ attack. But during my encounter with All for One, I was able to physically affect my surroundings with it. I want to improve the strength of my psychic attack. Also, I want to work on my Bojutsu skills. The clone nodded. That certainly is a very useful ability, and developing it to that extent can help in a variety of situations. All right, how do you want me to help? Stroking my chin, I thought for a moment and replied, well, you could walk towards me and I'll try to hinder your movement just by using the psychic ability. As I develop it, we can mix it up by you attacking me, and I'll try to stop you while I evade your attacks. Ectoplasm nodded. Sounds effective. By the way, what will you name this ability as? I smirked. I call it Conqueror's Will's dot. The clone grunted and began assisting me. After having tested All for One's will, I knew for certain that in order to defeat him, if in the future I somehow face him, I'd need to strengthen myself and improve my offensive abilities. Remembering how easily All for One was able to stop my fist of judgment, I was not at all ready to face the scoundrels of the society. 2 long hours of constant and unbridled training allowed me to make some improvements. The downside was that I broke my staff that had been specially designed for me to carry as my weapon. Aizawa-sensei had recommended me to go and see Power Loader in his lab and ask for his help. I was about to knock on the door when Ochako called out from behind and distracted me. Suddenly, the door of the lab exploded and something incredibly soft and squishy struck me on my face. When the dust cleared, I found my face to be enveloped between 2 large heavenly objects that smelled of sweat, oil, and ladies' deodorant. Life was good. The girl who was generous enough for my inner pervert to have a little more joy in his life turned out to be none other than Hatsume. Yeah, the same one who used Ida to show off her creations at the sports festival. Ochako, to whom I was eternally grateful for some blissful memories, was pouting and looked annoyed. The reason? Well, Hatsume was still lying on top of me and we hadn't moved for over a minute. I was barely able to breathe, but it was worth it. Don't you all dare judge me. I was a hormonal teenager. All teenage boys are perverts. Those who aren't are just too cowardly to let their perversion soar. Anyway, Hatsume immediately bombarded me with her obsession with her babies, as she called them when I told her about the reason I was visiting the lab. A bow was extremely easy to get, but I wanted something more. Since I had very little time to wait for the set equipment to be built, I settled for a bow staff made of a flexible yet strong metal that could handle my strength to some extent. It was collapsible, so it didn't hinder my maneuvers. I decided to keep it attached to my belt, and it could be drawn by a sensor on my wrist. I didn't even have to grab it. Just wave my wrist at it and voila, a bow staff ready to smack some douches. I excused myself, and Ochako followed, leaving poor Ida at Hatsume's mercy. For the next few days, we trained our quirks and improved in many ways. Katsuki, for example, thought of an attack that decreased the blast radius of his explosions and gave them a more piercing effect. A small incident occurred as he was practicing that move. A heavy piece of stone broke off and fell on All Might. Or it might have fallen, but was stopped by yours truly as I was blasting away ectoplasm's clones with Conqueror's will. It was like I could produce an invisible force field that decimated everything it touched. Much to my and the teacher's relief, I had exceptional control on my abilities, or at full power, I could have crushed my friends into a paste. As we continued our training, the doors of TDL were banged open by the homeroom teacher of Class 1B, more commonly known as Vlad King. "That's it for you, Class A," he growled. "We have plans to make use of the TDL from this afternoon. Eraser, you best get out." Aizawa-sensei retorted in his bland voice. "We've still got about 10 minutes left. You've got a little trouble telling time." My eye began twitching when Class B barged in the TDL. One hand, despite my perversion for all that's human and female, I was slowly sinking into the quicksand of love for Itsuka, their class representative and the unofficial big sis of the class. On the other hand, the entire class knew damn well how to get on my nerves. Monoma, despite the brutal ass whipping I gave him in the sports festival, hadn't changed much in his ways and was back to his ways of trying to goad us into an argument. Itsuka immediately found me, and we began talking about random stuff. The hazy blush on her cheeks that was absent around everyone else told me that she was interested, and I was absolutely certain that she saw the same thing on my face. Right when we were about to leave, I mustered enough courage and asked, "Hey, Itsuka?" She perked up and turned around, her cheeks once again flaring up with heat. "How about we hang out for a while the day before our provisional exam? It'll help with the nerves. So, what do you say?" Her face heated up faster than Katsuki's temper. If I accidentally dropped water on her, I bet it would have evaporated the moment it came in contact with her skin. Okay, maybe that's a stretch, but I could almost feel her body temperature rising. She somehow managed to squeak out an okay, before she robotically walked away. I breathed out a sigh of relief. After taking in the serenity of her figure as she calmed herself down and prepared to begin training, I walked out of the TDL with the rest of my class. 2 days before the provisional exam, I had a major breakthrough with my quirk. It happened when I training at the Dagoba beach. The sea was a little chaotic and the wind was harsh, yet I felt right at home. A storm was brewing up. I closed my eyes and let my body become one with the wind and the sea. I lost the sense of time, and before I knew it, the sun had begun setting. The wind was roaring and crashing against the chaotic waves of the sea, and the clouds were rumbling in controlled anger, ready to unleash their wrath as lightning and hail. But I noticed something off with the surroundings. The world seemed to be of a different hue than normal, as if a dense shade of green had been added all around me. When I realized what had happened, I gasped and felt the unimaginable power and potential my new ability had. I felt like the god of the storm. A day before the provisional exams, I got ready for something that was incredibly important to me. At 4 in the afternoon, I stood outside the gates of UA as I watched her approach with a smile on her beautiful face. IZUKU was wearing a loose top over her spaghetti that exposed her smooth yet toned shoulders and a mini skirt. She was definitely dressed for something more than a casual hangout. It was our first date, something I cherish to this very day. The details are hazy, but I remember that the date had been cracking sidewalks and watery sunshine that struggled past the clouds. We had made several loops of the block, how many neither of us could recall. On the first few circuits, the talk had been shy, despite having known each other for years, and then each of us backing away. Another few circuits, and we knew more about one another than any members of our own family. Our fingers entwined in a loose grip. As the date was coming to an end, I could feel her getting anxious. I had to do something. On the final loop around, I pulled IZUKU close into a kiss that stopped all her anxious thoughts dead in their tracks. Her lips were soft like the petals of a rose. I poured in all my feelings into that kiss. There was no heated battle, just the sweetness of the moment filling us with warmth, unfamiliar yet welcomed. That timeless moment has been ingrained in my mind. It has been years. It was my first kiss with the girl I loved. IZUKU. The day for our provisional license exam had finally arrived. The exam was being held at Takoba National Stadium, so you could say that it was a damn big deal. Good thing for us that Class B was at some other place. I really didn't want to go against IZUKU right after we became intimate with one another. After we climbed out of our bus, Aizawa-sensei addressed us. If you guys are able to pass this exam and get your provisional licenses, then you are no longer eggs. You will become chicklings, incubated to become semi-professionals. Do your best. He quickly glanced at me and backed away. I took the hint and moved in front of the rest of the class and said, "All right, let's do our best. No matter what, we'll have each other's back. Now gather around. Ready?" Plus, a rude idiot sneaked behind my back and tried to do what I thought he was about to. So, like a good student, I pushed him down and stopped him. Ultra. Everyone cheered the motto of UA. My expression immediately changed from cheerful to a scowl. I quickly turned around and grabbed Idiot by his shoulder and asked menacingly, "What the hell were you trying to do by sneaking behind me? It's rude to jump in others' huddles." Trust me, the dude was even more expressive than Ida. His face morphed from smiling like he saw midnight naked, to shock down to his very soul upon realizing that it was actually a nude pedophilic old man walking towards him while scratching his crotch. Ah, damn it. Yeah, I think that's exactly what he saw. Please accept. He bent his torso backwards and swung forward, only to slam his own head hard into the ground. My humblest apologies. My eye began twitching at how ridiculous it all looked. The dude was like a cross of Ida and Kirishima on steroids. His classmates immediately walked up to us and reprimanded him for acting like a weirdo. That's when I noticed the uniform they were wearing. Shiketsu High, the school in West Japan that rivaled UA. The rude idiot got up with a jerk. His face once again morphed into one that of pure joy even though he had begun to bleed from his head. He loudly exclaimed, "I just wanted to try and say it once. Plus Ultra. I myself, I muse say that I love UA. It's my utmost honor to compete with you all at UA. I wish you all the best." As he was taken away by his classmates, Aizawa-sensei began telling us about the idiot, Inasa Yurashi. Apparently, he topped the recommendation exam, but didn't join UA. The reason, I didn't care for it. There were more important things to focus on. I mean, why would anyone dwell upon some dude's reason for not joining UA when a hot heroine like Ms. Joke was walking towards them? Priorities. I really did have a thing for older women. Yeah, I had a girlfriend, but that doesn't mean I'd stop admiring the absolute wonder a woman's body is. It wasn't like I was going to cheat on IZUKU. I might be a closet pervert, but I'm not a damn cheat. The world is full of goddesses, but I had a goddess who trumped them all in my eyes, and she was my girlfriend. Anyway, as I was saying, I fully enjoyed watching the beautiful Ms. Joke and zoned out the world around me. She and Aizawa-sensei were close and knew each other from work, but their relationship wasn't intimate. She had brought the second-year students of Ketsubutsu Academy for the exam. They too had their quirks, pun intended, which I soundly ignored. Soon we entered the stadium and wore our costumes. We were led to a giant hall that, despite being one of the largest halls in Japan, seemed to be packed with students. Right at the front was a man who looked like he'd fall dead just with a gentle breeze. Seriously, zombies would look more healthy than that man. Taking his position at the podium, he addressed us. Well then, let's begin that provisional license thing. All right. Still looking at the documents in front of him, he continued, My name is Mara, and I'm from the Hero Public Safety Commission. My favorite form of sleep is NREM sleep. Good to meet you all. Again, priorities. My work has been so busy I've hardly been able to sleep. There's just not enough manpower. All right, with that jet of the way, let me explain this to you all. He let the podium bear his weight and continued, There are 1540 of you here taking this exam. We'll carry out an exercise to whittle down your numbers. In today's day and age, we are said to be living in a hero-saturated society. Ever since Stain's capture, there are many who question the current state of affairs with heroes. As an individual, no matter what the motive, to put your life on the line to save others, but don't seek anything. That is the merciless expectation of today's society. Hero killer Stain, that son of a bitch, had been the reason for a new boom in the number of villains coming out of their hiding holes. Even after his capture, he had been able to sway many to his way of thinking. But to me, he was nothing more than a weak-willed failure of a man who chose the easy way than the right way to get himself heard. In any case, be it for compensation or out of pure heroism, many heroes have endeavored and dedicated themselves to rescuing others and suppressing villains. From the beginning of an incident to its restitution, that window of time is becoming incredibly short. All of you who will receive the provisional licenses will be plunged into these rapids. For those who cannot keep up with that speed, I'll say it clearly, it is relentless. Therefore, what's being tested is your speed. The first 100 examinees who clear the conditions will pass. Just 100 out of 1540. Those were incredibly small numbers. Just a mere 5% out of all the students aspiring to move forward in their careers as pro-heroes. Mara patiently explained the rules of the test. In a gist, we had to tag 2 opponents to eliminate them and get qualified for the next round. The targets were like lives in a video game. Whoever took your last life would be given the credit. After he was done explaining, the walls of the hall began to expand, and we found ourselves in the middle of a vast terrain. Within a few moments, everyone began spreading out, trying to find locations best suited for their quirks that could be used to their advantage. While that was happening, I took a deep breath in and closed my eyes. I recalled all the hot posters of big sisters and cougars on the walls of my room, the date with Itsuka and the kiss we shared. For you all, I'll pass this exam. Priorities. As soon as the countdown ended, examinees from all around us rushed at us like hungry hyenas. With my lips twitching in annoyance, I said to my classmates, Guys, let's show these dogs why it's a bad idea to mess with the kings of the jungle. With the balls being thrown at us from all directions, I sneered and threw my arms out, creating an invisible dome with conqueror's will, and sent the balls back to their owners twice as hard. Take these back, suckers. You'll need them to replace the ones we are about to bust. Class 1A, plus Ultra. There are times in a man's life when he'd enjoy a good view in front of him despite the danger the scene posed. Yet, I couldn't get myself to enjoy the sexiness of the girl in front of me, who seemed hell-bent on tagging me with the ball in her hand. She was showing an unhealthy amount of interest in me. But the worst thing about her was the unhinged madness and bloodlust I felt barely being controlled by her. Something was wrong. There was something about her that rang warning bells in my head. Despite never having seen her in my life, her will felt familiar. Ignoring the thought of familiarity, I let the warning senses dominate that kicked in my fight-back response. What? You really thought I'd have flight in response to danger? Never. A hero never runs away from peril. A quick response to her hopeless attempts was in order. Covering my body with armament, I dashed towards her with a sudden boost of speed that took her completely off guard. I wasn't taking any chances. Given the feeling of unease and lust for blood and spilling guts I could sense in her, I wanted her away from everyone. So, pushing down the twang of pain in my chest for hurting a sexy girl who was generous enough to show enough skin on her chest to make Kaminari have a nosebleed, I rammed my knee into her abdomen like an unstoppable spear. The girl doubled over and screamed in pain. Lucky for me that all the noise created by Katsuki and his explosions covered her screams. I wasted no further time and tagged her with the ball in her hand and eliminated her. Given the way she was coughing bile out, perhaps I hit her too hard. But the thought quickly vanished when I sensed her letting go of her bloodlust just for a second. I breathed a sigh of relief as she was taken out of the arena by the exam officials. Whoever the girl was, I never wanted to meet her again. Soon after, Mara, the main organizer, announced, 0 left. 100 people. That's it, folks. The exam has been completed. Well then, it pains me to say this, but those of you who have failed to pass will need to withdraw from the premises. We all were happy. Each and every one of Class 1A had passed the first test, even Mineta. As the rest who had failed began leaving, Mara announced, well then, to the 100 of you who passed, please take a look. As we watched, boom 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 ba-dum, the entire battlefield from the first test was blown up to smithereens. What the hell? I looked over at Katsuki, who had a maniacal grin on his face, his eyes crazed and his breath labored. This dude is seriously sick. Holy shit, he is totally in a high right now. I shook my head and looked back at the screen. As the dust and smoke cleared, I could see numerous people of all ages walking towards the wreckage of what was left of the battlefield. It was none other than the HUC, a group specializing in rescue. This will be next and last stage for your exam. At this disaster site, we'll be having you all conduct rescue maneuvers. Everyone was given a set number of points, and the rescuers were the examiners themselves who would deduct points depending on errors made by us. You have a plan, don't you? Broccoli head. I was a little startled and exclaimed, Gah, Bakasuki, that's the best you can come up with. Huh, you want to go shitface. What about your face? Even your mom hates it. Maybe you'll be less ugly if you blow it up. You really have a death wish, huh? I sighed and said, of course I have a plan. I know exactly where all the rescues are. Yao Momo, I need you. 10 minutes later, all 100 of us walked into the collapsed battlefield with maps that had the exact location of every rescue marked on them. It was not a competition. More the participants passed, the better. The country needed more heroes. All was going well. We were rescuing people in record time. Just when I was about to think how easy it was, I felt a disturbance. A hostile intent was developing from thin air. I was on guard and ready to tackle whatever the officials had decided to throw at us. What I was not expecting was the fight Todoroki and the wind guy from Shiketsu High were having. With no regard for their fellow examinees or the rescues, the two were going at each other with fire and wind, two things that complemented each other. I wasted no time and launched into the air and towards them with thoughts of kicking but in mind. Suddenly, boom blasts everywhere. To protect the citizens, heroes are not only meant to carry out rescue operations, they have to repel the attacks from the villains. So was the case during the exam. And as the villain, it was none other than Gang Orca himself, the number 10 hero. Meanwhile, the two lunatics were still fighting. So like any good hero, I did what I could. I blasted the two with a strong wave of Conqueror's Haki and made them faint on the spot. Now that the brats are taken care of, will someone drag those idiots away? As the two were dragged away, I launched towards Gang Orca and engaged him in battle with the aim of pushing him away from the rescues. Slowly, the others also came and started defending against the villains. All in all, it was a success. I could see that Gang Orca's movements were incredibly slow. So, I had to pull my punches so as to not inflict too much harm. As we kept on fighting, I got excited and hit him a little too hard. As a result, the armor he was wearing shattered and he was sent flying through a broken wall. The whale hero got up, sighed and said, the restrictive protector really made it hard to move. I smirked in anticipation of his next attack. Since I broke the restrictive protector, I understood that his next move would be a lot stronger. If I could have your attention, please. All station members of the HUC have been rescued from the crisis area. This may be considerably selfish of me, but with that I must bring these provisional examinations to an end. Even Gang Orca was a little disappointed. I could tell he wanted to continue fighting. A while later, we all gathered around the big screen as Mara addressed us. Hello everyone, and thank you for waiting. You've all worked hard. I will now begin by presenting the result of the examination. But before that, I have a few words to say. In terms of how we went about evaluating you, between us, the members of Hero Public Safety Commission, and the HUC, we had two systems of point deduction that were combined to evaluate your performance. In short, we were examining both the quality and the nature of your conduct in situations of crisis. The names of all those who passed will be displayed in alphabetical order. Please go ahead and review your results. I passed, obviously. In fact, everyone from Class 1A passed except Todoroki. I was surprised that Katsuki managed to scrape by, but the boy had mellowed down a lot. At the end of the day, I finally hand my provisional license. I was ready to step into the world of professionals and walk among them. After we got our results, we were given handouts as Mara addressed us for one final time. Ahem, the handouts in your hands have the specifics of your scoring described in great detail, so please do look over them carefully. I had 89 points, and there was a detailed analysis on what I did to lose 11 points. With Todoroki the only one failing, it was success for 1A. But UT wasn't over for the ice-hot boy. He could retake the exam in April. As we changed back into our school uniforms and were getting ready to board the bus, I felt a presence leave the group of students. They kept walking away, so I focused and was alarmed when I realized who it was. The really hot girl who screamed danger. My instincts told me that something was wrong, and I chose to follow the girl. After flying for a little while, I saw the girl talking on her phone. Then something happened that chilled me to my core. Her skin melted and her real appearance came before my eyes. Holy freaking wrinkled old balls of all the gods. The nerve of them. I suppressed the urge to engage her in combat and dialed Aizawa-sensei's number on my phone. What happened? Was the question he asked right away. Villain infiltrator in the exam. Himiko Toga from the League. Possible abduction of a Shiketsu High student. Sending current location. Permission to apprehend. His tone immediately changed as he replied. Stay on their tail. Backup is on the way. Do not engage. Requesting to reconsider. She may escape at any moment. They have Kurogiri. He may appear at any time. I hear him sigh in frustration, and what he said next made my day. You have my permission. Run if the situation gets out of your hands. Got it. I concentrated hard, and in the next moment, I was right behind her ready to kick her in the head and knock her out. But she wasn't caught off guard. You have a wonderful smell, Midoriya-kun. Oh, how I wish to make you bleed and taste your blood. This girl is bat crap crazy. I flipped in the air and landed away from her. Himiko Toga, the polite and cheerful girl who went manic. The psychotic villainess giggled in delight and said, Oh, I feel so happy to know you researched about me. What else do you know? I know that your has a lot to do with your current state of mind. I know that because of your different quirk, your parents disowned you. I wonder how it all started. An injured animal, perhaps. You drank its blood and your parents saw you. They must have been scared out of their minds. I could sense emotions stir inside her, so I continued talking. Even for a world in which quirks is a norm, you were too abnormal. They must have forced you to act in a way so that you would be accepted in the society. Fighting the urge to drink blood must have been hard, right? There was no smile on her face. Instead, she was somber and resentful. Then, one day it all got too much for you to handle. There's only so much one can tolerate before they break. You are just another victim of this society. No one understood you. None of it was your fault. She was crying. Good. It's having an effect. You joined the League and found a place where people accepted you. A place where you could live the way you always wanted. It was never about blood, right? You just wanted to be accepted, to be understood, to be loved. Down on her knees, Himiko bawled into her forearms. I can help you, Himiko. The heroes can help you. Yes, we may have chased you around and seen you as just another villain. But now we know and we are capable of helping you. Surrender. Toga. Why you called me Toga? I smiled and extended my hand towards her. Come with me. There is a place for you among us. You don't need to be a villain to be free. This is the chance for you to redeem yourself. With her eyes sparkling with tears, Himiko looked at me with a little smile, and I smiled back, my hand still extended. The next thing I know, clang, her knife struck against my armament-covered hand, and she jumped away from me. You almost had me. I sighed and said, well, it was worth the effort. I didn't want to hit a pretty girl. Himiko giggled and said, so you think I'm pretty? You're kidding me? Have you looked at yourself in the mirror? And I wasn't lying, you know? We really can help you. Just surrender peacefully. We are heroes. We protect people, and villains are people too. Himiko scoffed, but remained silent. But She didn't attack, nor did she run away. In some ways, my words did strike a chord in her heart. I could have simply knocked you out and taken you in. But that's not what a hero does. We save people, especially when they need saving from themselves. Gritting her teeth, Himiko spat out, "I've had enough of this." Before she could attack, however, a team of heroes had arrived. SBE was clearly outnumbered, so she decided to bolt away, but I was way faster. With one attack of Conqueror's will, and she fell down like a sack of potatoes. Himiko was taken by the police and the heroes for questioning while I gave my statement to Tsukachi. After I was done, Katsuki walked towards me and asked, "That was different. You didn't attack her at all." "I am trying something new." I realized I was becoming way too easy to be provoked to start a fight. "That's not good. There's always a better way," Katsuki scoffed and retorted. "Like hell. You didn't attack her because she's pretty." I coughed and said, "Yeah, that may have been a factor. You have a girlfriend, you asshole." "Dude, I didn't do anything. Keep telling yourself that." "Oi, I love Itsuka. Didn't stop you from hitting on other girls." "Damn you, Bakasuki. What did you say?" Just a friendly banter. You know, the usual." Anyway, we got Himiko Toga. It was a major win for the heroes. Sometime after Himiko Toga's capture, I was informed by All Might that she was taken to a correction facility where they were going to treat years of psychological damage done to her by the society. I was told that my statement had helped her immensely and prevented her from being sent off to Tartarus. The villains had lost their infiltrator, and it was certainly a big blow to them. Meanwhile, I was back in school, and we were visited by the big three, i.e. Nijire Hato, the babble-mouth with amazing figure, Amajaki Tamaki, the socially awkward boy, and Mirio Togata, dude always on methamphetamines. Their introduction was crazy, psychotic, and disturbing. Nijire rambled on about whatever came to her mind. It was mind-numbing to some degree. Amajaki was shy and didn't look at anyone. I wondered what could have happened in his childhood to make him so socially awkward. Children can be very cruel. Meanwhile, Mirio, out of nowhere, decided to challenge all of us to fight him at once. That was the first time I used observation on him, and boy was I shocked. A 17-year-old built like a professional heavyweight MMA fight was rare to see. It was hard to imagine that he didn't have a strength-type quirk. As everyone braced for the battle, suddenly, Mirio's clothes fell right through his body. We felt a mix of shock, apprehension, and embarrassment. The dude stripped naked in front of everyone. I paid special attention to not look below his waist, and instead broke from my stupor and got ready for whatever he would have done next. The very next moment, he sunk into the ground and shot out like a mole at the back of the group, attacking the ranged fighters first. All it took was one blow to the gut for him to take everyone out. His strength was nothing to scoff at given that he didn't have a super strength quirk. When Mirio went after Katsuki, well, it was a fun short battle. Katsuki followed his instincts and fought back. He managed to evade the first hit to his gut, but simultaneously creating an explosion next to Mirio's fist, forcing the older boy to phase. But no matter how good your instincts are, you cannot hit what's intangible. Katsuki didn't go down with just a punch to his gut. No, he was way too tenacious for that. Mirio had to drive his fist into the explosive brute's liver to incapacitate him. Next, he came after us, the close-ranged ones. I took no chances and used the maximum of armament on my body. No way was Mirio going to punch me harder than that maniac muscle manipulator, Muscular. True to my belief, Mirio's fist landed clean on my gut, but it didn't do any damage. With a wild smirk on my face, I finally decided to retaliate and save face of Class 1A. It wasn't a hard battle. I hadn't found anything that could hide from my will of observation. No matter what state, I could sense Mirio's will as he shot out of the ground. I just had to catch him off guard. Also, he couldn't see until his eyes were out of the ground, so I could easily punt him over the head. As soon as I saw a semblance of his yellow hair out of the ground, I yelled, "I got you!" Hard enough for it to hurt, but not enough to make him bleed or give him any internal injury. I slammed my armament-covered fist into the top of his skull. Suffice to say, he clenched his head between his hands from the pain. "Are we going to play whack-a-mole?" I said with a smirk. Mirio smirked back and immediately resumed attacking. Yet, no matter how much he tried, he got hit every single time while I remained unharmed. In the end, Aizawa ended the battle as Mirio wasn't backing down, and I didn't want to hurt him anymore. After getting dressed, Mirio laughed uproariously and said, "Well done. You won, Midoriya Izuku." I inclined my head and asked, "Don't you mean we won?" This was a collective effort of Class 1A as a whole. Kirishima said, "What? It was clearly you who was able to fight him." "Yeah, we were all knocked out and couldn't do anything worthwhile." I shook my head and said, "You shouldn't see it in that way. We have our provisional licenses now. Officially, we can be heroes in the presence of professionals. It doesn't matter which hero took a villain out, as long as the villain is apprehended. One hero's win is a win for all heroes. At least, that's how I see it." Mirio laughed again and exclaimed, "Interesting. Your words have power. Anyway, like Bakugo Katsuki was able to fight back by predicting my moves. You need prediction. It's the way to be faster than your surroundings. It's the most critical skill of all. Anticipate your opponent's moves and act accordingly for the best outcome." And so, our session was at an end.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.